All right, everyone, don't move. I'll be done in 15 minutes, and this won't hurt you too much. And over the next 15 minutes, I will do my best to ensure that no one in this audience will hear those words coming from their prison cellmate anytime soon. No, sir, not on my watch. There are many ways that people in this industry could end up in jail. If you need me to tell you that it's best not to fly kilos of cocaine on your hawker, however, you've probably come to the wrong conference. Al's latest conference, the Narco Jet Investor Conference, will be taking place in Medellin, Colombia, sponsored by the Gentlemen of Cali and chaired by David El Chapo Hernandez. And that's lawsuit number 1, 30 seconds in. I told you this was a bad idea, Al. Hey, how was lunch, by the way? Did anyone get shanked? No? Well, the day is young, and I suspect I may become a shanking candidate shortly, if not already. While there are many ways that business aviation professionals could conceivably go to jail, breach of sanctions, fraud, theft, physical assault, and so on, I'm here, shockingly backed by popular demand following a session I gave at CJI Singapore, to talk specifically about corruption and bribery. Of course, there's also a myriad of national and international anti-corruption and anti-bribery laws that are analogous to what we're going to talk about, but this particular short presentation is brought to you by the letters F, C, P, and A, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which in turn can be brought to you wherever you are, whoever you are, by the good men and women of United States law enforcement, especially now that the US government shutdown is over. In any event, it can also increasingly be brought to you by international friends of United States law enforcement as well. But Paul, you may say, you're no poor man's Robert Mueller. What do you know, and why do you think it's worth my time? Well, Dick, can I call you Dick? Okay, Dick, allow me a moment of typical industry puffery to paint the background of why I'm standing here now talking about something other than doing deals, making money so we can all buy fast cars and keep our spouses, children, mistresses, and children of mistresses in a lifestyle to which they've regrettably grown accustomed to as a result of all the deal making we've been doing. Though firmly near the bottom of the proverbial totem pole in this industry myself, I have, over the last decade or so, helped the good, decent, law-abiding, and God-fearing men and women of this industry close over 250 deals. And in doing so, I've counseled wealthy individuals holding a combined wealth of over $250 billion United States dollars, as well as some lenders and others in this beautiful game. I act for private clients all over the world, doing deals all over the world, blah, 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 blah. Yay for me. I also have a degree in criminology and began working in the Canadian criminal justice system, including as a young, impressionable criminal defense attorney. And today I work with my firm's top-rated and really badass white-collar defense practice, including most recently in the context of, you guessed it, business aviation. I'm not here to puff myself up or my 150-year-old firm. This is a public service announcement. And I've put it together and come from Hong Kong via Dublin, Zurich, Davos, Dubai, and Bahrain in 6 days, and just arrived, by the way, because I've personally noticed a distinct, significant rise over the past 12 months in this industry's CSQ. Crazy shit quotient. And yes, that includes the Zeta affair, and no, I will not be talking about it. So look, I've seen a lot of crazy shit. I swear, by the way. I'm sorry, Al. I suspect that I'm not alone, but I've never, ever, ever seen a better artist's rendering of the very essence of the current state of business jet sales than this. And that ain't the owner, and it definitely ain't the lawyer. Could be a very happy broker after an undisclosed back-to-back sale, which, by the way, could well be perfectly legal, even if it is slightly unethical and potentially the subject of a civil suit. But to my mind, the artist meant this to be some middleman or woman having taken his or her cut. What's wrong with that, you may ask? Oh, Dick, stay tuned. Let's focus in. The Fcpa risks for private aviation industry market participants are real and significant. This is a sector that operates in a particularly dangerous minefield for Fcpa violations, which, as we'll see, can lead to penalties reaching into the millions of dollars and even prison time for individuals. As I've written, quote, "This results from a confluence of factors inherent in the very nature of a global industry built around an ecosystem of airborne opulence that rewards hyper-aggressive marketing and promotion." It's really well written, if I do say so myself. It's also where, to be brutally honest with ourselves, the business ethics among some in the sector, including occasionally some of the biggest names, are at times questionable. Compounding all this is the fact that new and used trading activity so often involves emerging economies, and that corruption and emerging economies generally go hand in hand, as you can see from this map, or any corruption risk index that you'll find on the Google. Doing business in this industry in emerging markets often requires extensive interaction with government agencies, or most often individuals who may be considered, quote, foreign officials under the official US government's broad interpretation of such term for Fcpa purposes, which I'll talk about. So opportunities for Fcpa-related business risk abound, especially in countries where there is a deep-seated cultural tradition of gift-giving and entertainment as an acceptable, if not required, means of conducting business. There's various factors such as cultural mores, historic business practices, and operational hurdles, which all increase the risk of Fcpa violations in emerging markets. In China, for example, two wrongs do make a right. That was bad. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. In all seriousness, though, as an example, in Chinese business culture, the tradition of gift-giving and entertaining as a sign of respect runs deep, as it does in many other cultures like Saudi Arabia. Traditionally in China, when entering into a new business relationship, the party in the weaker bargaining position sought to woo the other party, often named Mr. Wu, to the negotiation table with gifts and/or entertainment. Given that there's many levels of bureaucracy in any given PRC company, gift-giving occurred and still occurs at various levels of management. Further, across various industry sectors, including aviation, providing kickbacks was, and yes, still is, kind of standard business practice. Is that corruption, or is that just doing business in China? Who, other than the Chinese, is to say? Well, enter Team America World Police, to save the world, or at least the US, from the tyranny of the foreign corrupt. The two long arms of the US enforcement arms that are relevant here are the all-powerful Department of Justice, and for our purposes, to a lesser extent, except where you're talking about companies with US-listed securities, the US Securities and Exchange Commission. By the way, if you haven't seen this movie, it is an excellent satire that I highly recommend. And believe it or not, I'm into satire. Let me make this clear so there is no mistake. The department, the business jet industry is very firmly on the radar of the US Department of Justice. In fact, it is considered a, quote, target-rich environment. And it has been for some time, though obviously that does not mean that they pull the trigger on each and every target. Quite the opposite. The Fcpa turned 40 this year, and not many realize that one of the very, very first enforcement actions under the Fcpa involved private jets. Specifically, the sale of Gulfstream II aircraft secured through corrupt payments by a third-party agent of Gulfstream decades ago. Private aviation is an industry that US regulators and enforcement agencies have brought under their proverbial magnifying glass from time to time, knowing well what they would likely find. Indeed, over just the past few years, the DOJ and the SEC have opened at least 9 business aviation-related Fcpa investigations around the globe, resulting so far in 7 enforcement actions and prosecutions. As a consequence, the consequences have been dire. About 5 senior executives and sales managers associated with private jet companies, this is all public, it includes Embraer and Lufthansa and others, have been charged, and over $654 million in fines and penalties has been paid over to the United States government as a result of civil settlements, plea agreements, and other criminal resolutions arising, again, directly out of business aviation over just the past few years. Since ignorance of the law is no excuse, and despite Al telling me not to make this too legal, the Fcpa is a US statute that generally criminalizes the bribery of foreign officials anywhere in the world by companies subject to its provisions. To date, prosecutions and enforcement actions under the FCPA have been brought against U.S. publicly traded companies, U.S. companies doing business abroad, and, importantly, foreign companies falling within the jurisdiction of the FCPA. And I'll tell you who that is, and it's basically everyone. Indeed, foreign companies can be subject to FCPA provisions as well, and the U.S. criminal law enforcement agencies have made it very clear that their intention is to cast as wide a net in enforcing the FCPA around the globe as possible. The FCPA is generally divided into two sections, commonly known as the anti-bribery provisions and the accounting provisions. The anti-bribery provisions are the most relevant for us here, and they generally prohibit payments or offers of payments of, quote, anything of value to foreign government officials, either directly or indirectly, in order to corruptly influence the official in some act to secure improper advantage in an attempt to obtain or retain business. And just hold that thought for a second, because I know you're probably thinking, I don't deal with foreign officials. We'll talk about that. The increasingly common reality is that United States enforcement agencies can make use of extra-jurisdictional provisions of the FCPA to exert jurisdiction on the basis of actions as slight as sending incriminating emails outside of the US or making transfers to or through a US bank account. The FCPA applies as follows: any US citizen or resident, any US business entity or foreign issuer of US securities. It's all good, right? You don't fall in any of those, but here's the catch-all. Any individual, any company, any officer, employee, or agent of any company doing any act in furtherance of unlawful payments anywhere in the world using, quote, US mail or, quote, any other means or instrumentality of interstate commerce. Just to translate that from legalese, that means United States dollars clearing or just United States dollars. So in today's matrix business world, non-US companies and persons may find themselves subject to FCPA because of some business activity that relates to the misconduct that has a US connection, even though that this connection may not be apparent or even strong or frankly even relevant. The FCPA has been the basis of hundreds of enforcement actions, billions of dollars in criminal and civil fines, and many jail terms, though trials have been very few. There's some further information about penalties and sanctions on the slide. Just note that they are hefty and serious. What I want to talk about here, in 2015, Deputy U.S. Attorney General Sally Yates issued a memorandum to all federal prosecutors announcing a policy holding individual corporate officers accountable in corporate investigations. This is known as the Yates Memo. And in the years since 2015, every single year, there has been a marked increase in the strong focus of individual defendants. As of today, individual defendants make up well over 80% of the Department of Justice's current FCPA docket, not companies, individuals. Look, apart from its existence, reach, and consequence, there are two concepts under the FCPA that I want you to understand: foreign officials and corrupt payments. I am going to read this because it's very important. Foreign official is very extensively defined by design, and it covers corrupt payments to low-ranking employees and high officials alike. Here is who is covered: any officer or employee, including low-level employee or of a government or any government department, agency, instrumentality of government, including employees of government-owned or government-controlled businesses and enterprises. Political party officials and political candidates. This all seems kind of obvious, right? Royal family members, all of them, even that lowly, no-name prince that comes to you with his hand out. Every single member of every single royal family around the world is caught. And also, as are immediate family members of politicians. And finally, critically, any third person who will use payments to gain influence with any of the aforementioned government officials. Okay, I know I'm running low on time, Al. Luckily, this is a detail slide, and you can refer to it. You can refer back to it later, maybe in the back of a police car. But basically, it's anything of value, direct or indirect, including through local agents, consultants, subsidiaries, or even attorneys. There is no de minimis exception. There's no need to go big or go home here. It can include anything that a recipient would find interesting or useful. That's the actual quote. So this includes cash. I find cash interesting and useful. Meals, alcohol, tobacco, two of my favorite things, consumer goods, internships, event tickets, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. No, Al, time is not finished. Time is infinite, so there. Okay, 60 seconds, I promise. The single most important factor in FCPA defense is having in place comprehensive FCPA compliance policies. That applies to every company. This includes training and monitoring, just to show that you had a record of being aware of FCPA risks and monitoring them and training individuals, et cetera. There is no obvious there's no time to go through all of these features of these compliance policies, but the area that I thought would be most useful and valuable to share with this audience is a snapshot of a policy regarding payments, gifts, and entertainment. So for you photo slide takers, take a photo of this slide. Yeah, I think it'll be available later as well. So look, this is not legal advice, but follow this and you should generally be okay. When it comes to payments, gifts, and entertainment, okay? You're welcome. If I had to pick one or two key points, I can feel Al burning a hole in me. Payment, gift, entertainment given openly and transparently, recorded in the giver's books. The larger or more extravagant a gift or entertainment, the more likely it will be perceived to be given with an improper purpose. Just those two takeaways. Okay. I'm out of time here, but I will not leave without highlighting the recent case of the United States versus Embraer and also the United States versus a former Embraer sales employee, who I'm not going to name. This case involved deals in the Dominican Republic, Saudi Arabia, Mozambique, and India. And I'm not picking on anyone here. This is all public. These are excellent case studies in how to violate the FCPA, get caught, make things worse for yourself, and pay the price, though it could have been far worse for everyone involved, especially the individual. All the information is readily available on the Google. I encourage you to make use of the Google and take the time to read the details, which I know very well, but I'm not going to talk about. The good news is that the subject company, Embraer, which paid a hefty fine, is by many accounts now one of, if not the industry leader in terms of compliance with anti-corruption and anti-bribery laws globally. So lessons learned, lessons painfully learned. Also, the subject individual who was fined and I'm sure underwent quite the ordeal, very recently avoided what could have been a lengthy jail term. Final words. Do not think for a second that there will not be more like this against others, especially individuals. It's coming, I know, it's been coming for some time, and I know that some people will see the rain. As Al said, I will indeed be giving away a Lamborghini, this Lamborghini, to the first person who is not a foreign official who gets the song reference I just made a few seconds ago. Now, the part you've all been waiting for, I'm done talking. Thank you for your time.
I'm not actually sure if we should have a minute's silence for some of your jokes. We've got a question from the audience. One question, then you can go. In a transaction, should you collect information on the other side to know who you are dealing with and where that money came from?
It often depends on the nature of the transaction. And so if you are, for example, a law firm or a financial institution that is receiving funds, yes, absolutely, basic KYC. That does not mean that you are all of a sudden deputized by the Department of Justice to go out, investigating things. There are services which you can employ. There's WorldCheck, there's Orbis, there's a few others. So just the very basic checks. And clearly, if there is something that you suspect could be awry, then your obligations sort of increase. But short of that, no.
Great. Thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.